Let's talk about two hip hinge variations that can help address different tightnesses in the backside of the pelvis. So we can think of our glute muscles as a fan of muscles all along the backside here that we want to be able to eccentrically lengthen to help set up for then a better concentric contraction. If it stays tight back there, that can also affect the pelvic floor and the hip function, and even affect how our lower abs can function. So what we want to think about here is kind of initiating a hip hinge. We're thinking about sitting back into our glutes and feeling those sit bones widen. Now, if we do a retro hip hinge, where we're thinking more about shifting into the backside hip, that is going to get a little bit more kind of upper to middle, maybe a little bit of bottom glute fibers. However, if we hinge over a front leg sitting back into that hip still, that is going to get more into the bottom part of those glutes and into the proximal hamstring. The problem with thinking about the proximal hamstrings, where people may be swung too far the other way, is that people can have the tendency to over lengthen from the proximal hamstrings to make up for the inability to open in their glutes. So I'm going to go over some things to pay attention to help make sure that you're getting an equal distribution of load and lengthening through the glutes and the proximal hamstrings. So first off, we're going to think about this retro hip hinge. So with this one, I'm going to have my left foot back and my right foot forward. I'm going to focus on sitting into my left glute here, and that glute getting bigger. So as I go to do this, I'm going to think of my hip sitting straight back, thinking about this left sit bone getting wider and this left glute getting bigger as I lengthen in my glute here. I'm feeling this as a straight horizontal movement with it, like my butt's kind of skimming over a table. I'm making sure that I'm not rounding in my back, getting the length from my back instead of in my glute, and not lowering down, which is going to make me get more load in my quad instead of my glute. So as I'm doing this movement here, my knee is staying soft and over that midfoot. If it has the tendency to be more forwards, that's going to load my quad more and my knee, versus if I think about my weight getting more into the back of my heel, that's going to load my glute more. I want to make sure we don't take it too far and have that knee straighten, because now I'm lengthening more of that distal hamstring at the backside of my knee instead of my glute. So now that we're getting into areas that might feel sticky, we might need to work on it and gently encourage that to happen versus thinking it's going to be perfect right from the get-go. So again, as I'm here, I'm thinking about this left glute opening, that sit bone coming to the side, that butt getting bigger and lengthening. And I'm thinking about maybe even turning my pelvis towards that back hip to help it open up a little bit more, making sure that I don't go so much that it swings this way. So as I go to do that, I can think a little bit about my right hip coming a little forwards to help me sit back and load into that glute, making sure that left knee is pointed straight ahead. Now that can be great for people that tend to kind of overuse their hamstrings in their lengthening strategies, maybe rest in a little bit more of an anterior pelvic tilt at that pelvis tipped forward. So we kind of take out, don't lengthen quite so much down below here, and get more lengthening up top here. Now, on the flip side, if there's someone who tends to be a little bit more tucked under in that pelvis, or has a hard time eccentric lengthening in that proximal hamstring, so this can be someone where maybe they start off in some of that anterior pelvic tilt, and then as they go to hinge, they go to tuck under, then maybe we need to do this other version as well to help think about how we can lengthen with control versus kind of going into the all or nothing. We might also have to backtrack with those people too and find a little bit more proximal hamstring as an isolation to improve that pelvic stability and tension for the hamstrings to then eccentrically lengthen from. But that's another video for another day. So with this one, I'm going to have my left foot forward, and I really like using a chair as kind of a reference point. We're thinking of this front knee staying kissing the chair versus pushing it away or pulling it back away from it. So I don't want to get up to the chair with my knee locked out here. I want to think about getting my foot under it and then having my knee gently soften forwards. So this knee is over that midfoot. My right foot now is just kind of more like a kickstand right next to me, nice and close here, versus being really far back, because now I'm loading this front leg and glute here. So now I'm still going to think about initiating the movement of sitting back, right? So my hips have to go back for those sit bones to widen. But now what's gonna happen is if I just kind of keep sitting back, I'm gonna run out of range and I'm gonna try to drop down, either loading my quad or rounding my back, instead of getting more of that lengthen load through that proximal hamstring and inferior glute. So with that knee staying soft, I'm gonna have to think about sitting back, and then I'm almost gonna have to think about my pelvis tipping up and over my femur, that tailbone kind of lifting up as I hinge forward. So this is helping me stay centered on that left foot. This is helping my hips move in that pure horizontal pattern without dropping down, right? So that we're getting that length in the glutes and then that hamstrings. My pelvis and rib cage are moving as a single unit, whereas if I were to sit back and then go to tip here and kind of break in a sense and lengthen through my abs, now we're losing that good core control and not actually getting the length in the glutes and the hamstrings like we want in that equal way. The knee reference helps you make sure that we're not getting length from the hamstrings instead. It's also helping to make sure that you're not pushing that knee forward and trying to load the quads. So that knee is just staying kissing there. You're sitting back, and then that pelvis is lifting up and over the femur as you keep sitting back. So now all this is lengthened and loaded. And then when we're gonna come back up, that knee stays in that same position. So you have the same amount of weight on that front foot throughout the whole movement. Your pressure shouldn't change as you go down and come back up to help make all that action happen in the hips rather than happening in the knee and the foot dynamically. But hopefully this gives you a great opportunity to kind of experiment a little bit for what you or your client in front of you needs. It could be too where maybe on one side someone needs one variation and on the other side of their pelvis they need the other variation to kind of balance things out. And that can be particularly the case if things are feeling kind of twisted, if they have SI joint pain or pubic symphysis pain, or have a hip that likes to kind of swing out to the side. So enjoy experimenting, and I hope you find glutes and proximal hamstrings in a new way.